and I was on the side of the house, and this damn thing is 2 feet away from me, and its ass is pointed right at my face, and the tail straight up in the air, and
not in a good way.
No, I fled, and it was uneven terrain. I tripped on a rock. I landed on another one.
Oh, it hurts like a mother.
It was awful.
This one, see that, playing soccer?
Oh.
Wiggles? Wait, no, hang on. Yeah, this one. It's a fake joint, and the whole thing wiggles. It just sticks.
Oh.
I was moving I was like 40, and I was moving this 19-year-old kid off the ball, and I shouldered into him, and it was like a bundle of sticks snapping.
Yeah. Yep. Did you
is yours deformed? Don't worry, guys. We'll get to book soon, but this is a quick.
This is much better.
No.
I'm so glad I can't see any of these joint injuries right now. Thank you, my lucky stars.
My son-in-law caught the skunk. My son-in-law caught the mother skunk in a trunk, in a trap, and then took it out to the forest. Thought he was doing a good thing. It was trying to get under his porch.
No, you said you caught the skunk in the trunk. That's much better.
I thought it was a Dr. Seuss book.
That's
And then the 5 babies came, and you can't do it. Yeah, they called, and they came one at a time, and he kept calling the animal control, and they said, all you can do is kill them. And that tore my son-in-law apart, and they had to hide the kids so the kids couldn't see.
Well, guys, the bad news is we might as well cancel this event, because since Scott Brick broke his collarbone fleeing a skunk, he's no longer going to be the voice of Evan Smoke now. I was expecting something way more impressive, like, a woman was getting robbed. There was like a purse snatching up a dark alley, and he went in. But skunk fleeing, I don't know anymore, Scotty.
That's actually, if I can just get my narrator cred back, I narrated Prodigal Son while waiting for this to heal, and literally I couldn't even sit in the booth by myself. Suzanne had to come over and literally help me sit down, because there's just nothing you can do.
At least the skunk wasn't there.
Yes, right. Exactly.
So, well, thank you all for joining here. Is there who's the MC for this particular event?
That would be me. That would be me, Colin Rutherford over here in Belfast.
Hey, Colin.
I'm sort of honored to meet you. We set the Orphan X fan club up a while ago, and we didn't expect this to happen at all. We have got you, best-selling author, and Scott, one of the best audiobook narrators ever. It's just amazing to have you both here. And we've got so many people that want to join in and ask questions and interact and have a bit of fun. That's what this is all about. Just to have a bit of crack, as they say in Belfast. So
I don't know if Greg's allowed anymore then, because you said fun. Is that a requisite? Is that?
Oh yes, it is. Greg, if you're not allowed to have fun, you've got to leave right now.
Oh, well, I'll try to
It's too early to have a martini out here in California.
It's never too early.
It's late enough over here in Belfast, so I'm having some wine.
Well, Scotty and I can just start chatting. And if you guys have questions, why don't you put them in the chat? And so we can dip in and out. But the first thing I should say is that I was thinking about this with this event coming up. And Scott was, in fact, the first person who I had attached to the Orphan X series before I even had a publisher anywhere, because I went over to Scott's house. I had written the rough draft. And in the rough draft, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay with my current publisher, because Orphan X was such a break. By the way, am I echoey, or can you hear me okay?
A little bit echoey, but Scott will forgive you.
Okay. Is this better if I talk quieter like this?
That's fine.
All right. This is my Scott Brick voice. Hello, everybody. So I was fleeing the skunk in abject terror. So I went over to Scott's place, and he recorded that 1-855 to nowhere phone number was in the manuscript. And I said, when editors are reading the book to decide if they are going to bid on it or not, I want to have that number hooked up to something. And in fact, as you all know, that number is hooked up to something. And if you call it, you get Scott Brick. That was before I had a publishing deal. I had a feeling I was going to stay with my current publisher at Minotaur. and in the UK, right? So I knew kind of where I wanted to land, but it was such a new venture that I wanted everyone to have a chance for me to say, here's the new series, like, do you love it and do you want in? So I wrote it on spec for the first time in probably a decade, because I wanted the whole thing done, and I wanted anyone who wanted it to be on board fully, not just because they were already committed to it. So Scott Brick was my first commitment. He was the first one who did that. I showed up at his house. I'm eternally grateful to him for that.
Excellent.
And he recorded that voiceover piece. So we had that, and I had the email lockdown that Evan and Jack trade emails on. And then off we went with the manuscript. And then when I got my audio deal, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think I was one of the first, if not the first author to put in the contract that it had to be Scott Brick recording the voiceover. I had a clause in my contract that said, I'll sell you the audiobook, but it's got to be Scott.
That's amazing.
It's nice. My agent loved that. She was like, "Oh, let's chat with the publisher."
Well, you can't, it's such a bit of casting, it's as sure and important casting for the audiobook as it is when you're casting, a movie or a TV show. If it's the wrong cadence, even if someone's talented, but it's wrong, it just doesn't work. Right. And so I wanted to make sure I knew Scott, we'd worked together since The Crime Writer was our first. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. So we'd worked together for I don't know, eight books already. And I just knew he had the cadence down for this. And so, the audiobooks have been enormously successful. And I when Scott's not around, I credit him for that. But when I'm around, I like all the attention myself. So
I just love the way that you two guys are just friends in real life as well. That's just.
I think I put in a photo in the group page. There's a photo of I guess it was oh yeah, that's right. Last June, a year ago, June, it was my 20th anniversary doing audiobooks. Oh. And so my girlfriend Suzanne threw this huge party here at my house, a big catered event. And there's a photo of Gregg and I. He came that night, and we're standing over here by my office door. My office door is a recreation of Sam Spade's office door. It says Spade and Archer, confidential investigators. So there's a photo of the two of us in front of that. Yeah, it was great.
Great. That was a fun party. It was very kind of James Bondy. You had the bar set up.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All kinds of accoutrement. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Had I had special cocktails for the evening, themed cocktails.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Which is better than morning themed cocktails, which are never good. That's just mimosas and you run out.
Right.
So the TV show update, I am figuring that out. The pandemic has been a total, everything's been thrown on pause. I'm just dipping into the chat for that first question. The TV show, I'm still working on it. I want to reconfigure it a little bit. One of the things that's been tricky is, as I'm writing forward in the books, I'm trying to figure out where to start the series for TV. And then if I write something new in the books, that's a new discovery that I've made, right? I want to integrate that into the pilot. So I'm kind of seesawing around a little bit, figuring it out.
So there is a TV show happening?
Well, we hope so. It's in development right now. I've built a nice team around it. I sold it to E1/Make Ready. We're putting it together bit by bit, and I'm trying to figure out what the right balance is. And I feel like the pandemic just pushed pause on everything.
Yeah.
I have two feature screenplays moving forward. One's in post-production starring Jason Momoa. I just sold another one, but on the Orphan X front, it's been more stop-start. So I'm still figuring that bit out.
Oh, so excited about that. And I know everybody here is really excited about that too.
And Elaine, where's Elaine? Let me see. Oh, there she is. She said, when did you change the message on the phone? Did we change the message?
I don't think we did. And you were mentioning it earlier. I just, there's a lot of people here who live overseas and they haven't been able to call the number. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now and put it on speaker. So hopefully you can hear this. Let's see here.
Do you need my help? Where did you get this number? Listen very carefully to what I have to tell you. Your life depends on it. Before the movie is imperative. I have to go. I'll contact you later.
That's beautiful. The first time you did not have the tires squealing, and you did not say your life depends on it. I had listened to it a few times, and I had my son who helped me do an audio thing, my grandson rather. And I do not remember. You started, my name is Evan.
Huh. That might have been one that you recorded for the fan book page, Scott. I think you did.
That might have been
there. So
that might have been the one, because
rangy ones.
yeah, when we recorded the one that you just heard, we had all the lines in there. But of course, as I told Greg that day, he came over and he's hanging out outside of my booth, and he says, "Has any other author ever asked you to do this?" And I said, "No, that's why it's so cool." And but then I had to give him the audio tracks because I don't do sound effects. That's not my area of expertise. But thankfully, his team knew how.
And so, Scott, you have a question from Mike, who's asking how you practice or research different dialects and accents from the books, first of all. And then do we discuss review to make sure that we match the character that I'm writing?
Yeah, one of the first things that you do when you get the manuscript is you, especially now that, they're PDFs, I can search for the word accent, or I do voice just to hear about vocal qualities that might be described. Raymond Chandler had the best vocal description I've ever read. He said, this guy had a voice like cigarettes and low shelf booze.
Excellent.
And, it implies so much, even though it's not specific. And so I look for things like that. As far as the accent goes, the various accents, there's a wonderful database online, the IDEA, in all caps, International Dialects of English Archive. And it is the biggest boon to audiobook narrators ever, because they take the same text and they have people from everywhere on earth read it aloud. And so you can hear all of these people with native speaker accents.
That's amazing.
From all over the UK, all over the US. The US is, of course, broken down by the 50 states. Europe is broken down by each individual country. It's extraordinary.
Guys, like the guy down the bottom street speaks with a different accent than I do. Just saying.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then Mike was asking too, this is Mike's second part. Do we confer before you embody one of the characters? Like Tommy Stojak or Melinda Trong or?
I don't remember doing so for that. I know we have talked at various times about how to make them sound. Every now and again, when there's a character who has, well, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give anything away if people haven't read the entire series. But there's a wonderful character called Trayvon, and every now and again we'll not necessarily on the phone, but exchange an email saying, "Hey, this is what's going on with this character." One of the characters that Greg had, what was it? Was it in Trust No One, where his best friend was partially deaf?
You're next, Shep.
You're next. It was Shep.
Yeah, you're next, Shep.
Shep, yeah, and it was the first time I'd ever had to do that. Shep had a thing. If he didn't want to answer a question, he would play up the sounding deaf, and so he could. Here he is, just delivering the most eloquent lines, wonderful dialogue, and then if there was a question he didn't want to ask, he would go, "What?" And yet I had to learn all of that, right, and watch YouTube videos of that, because you want to be accurate and yet also respectful.
Let's hear your Trayvon. Give us a little Trayvon.
Oh, it's hard to do without any lines. I remember that scene.
Give me a hi, I'm Trayvon. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for showing up.
Hello, my name is Trayvon. It is very nice meeting everybody. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah. Now let's have some Tommy Stojak.
Oh God. Okay, this is my favorite line from this is, I don't want to give anything away, but this is one of my favorite lines of Tommy Stojak ever. His first appearance in the book, Evan has been beat up by this point. And he arrives looking all disheveled, and Tommy looks at him and says, "You look like a bag of smashed asphalt." I just love that character.
So good. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll up here to Mike. And then as an author, this is from Sarah Scott. Does it scare you to allow a production team to take your work with so much special personality and let them adapt it for the screen? Let me see. Where's Sarah Scott? Sarah. I don't see her. All right, let's talk bad things about Sarah Scott because she's not on.
I'm here, but you don't want to see my background. I've got like 50 children running around me.
Oh, there she is. Oh, I like children. So it does, look, I'm involved with the adaptation. I would be the showrunner. I'm co-creating it right now with a guy called Derek Kolstad, who created the John Wick series. So I'm writing it. I just need somebody else to have a hand in that also. And, you know, there's always a concern it won't turn out right, but because I'm involved with it creatively, if it doesn't turn out right, it'll at least be my fault also. So I feel a little bit better about that. Let me just see here. Okay, so there's an author. Follow up to the TV show. Are you following any other authors whose shows are also in production? Not really. I'm trying to kind of make it its own thing. I mean, I do know there's some stuff that I admire, you know, greater than others. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, but I'm still trying to fully figure out how to get this all conveyed. There's so many aspects of Evan that are internal. And so I want to figure out the ways we can make it the most interactive without necessarily making it too typical TV-like. And so it's a really challenging adaptation. So I'm figuring that out still. All right, John Kirkton II said, will there be more in-depth development of Tommy Stojak and Melinda Trong and how they met Evan? Yes. Hey, Scotty, let's hear your Melinda Trong.
Oh God, again, I don't have you know what? Give me a minute. We've got that script that we did for the Men of Mystery event, and you were doing this then, but at least then I had a script. It's, you know.
All right, I won't keep playing you like a slot machine then.
No, I'm happy to do it. I just need to have something to read from.
Okay.
You do it so well.
I love that Sarah Ann plays the commercial to customers who come into the bookstores looking to buy stuff. That's great. I love that. Good work, Sarah Ann. Scott, how did you start in the voiceover work?
It's funny. I was an actor. I went to UCLA in the theater department, and as I left, and of course you was focusing on stage and screen work, I was in my doctor's office. I had to have a root canal, and I was poor as a church mouse. I had no money, and he told me it was going to be $500. And he said, I was like, look, I don't even know how I can do that. And he said, you know, you got a really great voice. You ever do voiceovers? And when you're an actor, if somebody says, have you ever done something? You say, yes, I do that a lot. I'm an expert, or I can be by tomorrow morning when you need me. And so I said, sure, all the time. And this was 30 years ago. And he said, we've got this thing, I don't know, it's new. It's called voicemail. And I've got a big practice here, and there's 30 people, and I'm supposed to record it. And I sound like crap. I tell you what, you record all those messages for me, and we'll just call it even. And I think that was the first time that I woke up to the idea that there might be something there. So
he's a bartering man. I got this sore tooth, Doc. What can I do for you? I got a sore tooth and a limited skill set. What are we going to do? How are we going to work it out?
Exactly.
It is such an unlikely, amazing profession. You know, one of my other favorite Scott stories is I have a friend, because when you live in LA, you know, there's certain levels of pretension among acquaintances. And I have a friend who has a private amphitheater, and he would host Shakespeare events there. And I studied Shakespeare, you know, in my youth, in my wayward youth. And so I showed up to give a little talk about it. And one of the actors there was a Shakespearean actor, Roy, what's his last name? Scott, voiceover guy?
Roy Dotrice.
Roy what?
Roy Roy Dotrice? Wait, Roy? Oh, Ray Porter?
Ray Porter. I'm sorry, it's Ray Porter.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the Shakespeare actors there was like, "Oh, I do book voiceover work. I heard you're a novelist. Like, who do you have do your stuff?" And I said, "Scott Brick." And he like took a step back, was like, "Scott Brick does your voiceover work? He's considered the dean of voiceover audiobooks." He was like staggered in awe. So that's the first time I realized I could use Scott, not just for his talent, but as a social climber, I can use him to open more doors for me. So if you're ever at an event with somebody who has a private amphitheater, just Scott Brick's the name to drop. That's what I learned. All right, let's see here. So that's Scott, how did you come up with Tommy's accent? It's so unique and distinctive.
Well, you see, I feel like I'm giving away the farm here, and now everybody's going to know when they listen. A friend of mine, Pat Fraley, a legendary voiceover guy, he played Krang in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He came up with this curriculum where he talked about the 6 things that we can do physically to alter our voice. And one of them is a pitch characteristic. And I just started paying attention when I heard different ones. And I will try not to do so much that it sounds like I'm doing an impression of somebody. But I remember the guy, and now I'm blanking on his name. He was the actor who played Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. He had this very constricted nasal passage. And I remember him, that line, he kind of, he was always kind of doing this with his nose. I remember at one point, the people who do a bad impression of him will say, "Wait, you mean that big old fat girl?" That kind of thing. But in many ways, he's much harder to understand. Tommy has to be, you have to really understand what he's saying. If I'm getting in the way of Gregg's words, that's, I've failed my job. So yeah, I back off on that a little bit, but that's that, and just the attitude that comes through so clearly. To me, I think you can do a physical characteristic on a voice, but unless you wed it to like the emotional truth of the scene, then it's kind of an empty experience. I just go with the attitude that Gregg writes, and then I keep that pitch thing in mind. Yeah, it's more art. It's like, it's a melding of art and craft, because you have the craft end down, but the interpretation has to be, it's a really weird tightrope back. The actor is Ted Levine, by the way. Oh God, of course. And I really love his work. Okay, so let's see. Sent this into the Google Doc. My question is for Gregg. Assuming you're planning to keep Evan's story going for several more books, while there's already an amazing cast of characters, is there a character you would like to introduce that could be a longtime fixture, or an existing character you would consider writing a full-length spin-off for? And that's from Scott. There he is. Hi, Scotty. Are you a Scotty or just a Scott?
Just a Scott.
Okay. So yeah, there's a character that I'm tinkering with. It's so funny because I'm out ahead a little bit, which is good because I needed it. And there's a few characters that I'm kind of keeping, and some come in and out. I think Tommy's been in every book. Joey's been in every book since I introduced her. Melinda's going to go in and out, right? Like, so there's some characters that when I need them, I'm going to pull them in, but if they don't fit, I don't want to just have a detour to go see Melinda just to have it. So, but there's a few new ones I would say that are definitely in the running. And so it's this weird thing. I keep picking them up and building out the world, and then I like them a lot, or they grow on me. And so I have this cast, I can pull them down off the shelf when I need them for something. Yeah. Prodigal Son sees a lot of introduction to new characters, as you know. The woman claiming to be Evan's mom, appears, and he has a journey back to his past. Have any of you read it yet with an advanced reader's copy, or just Scott? Yeah, so it's the most personal. It's a journey back into his past to really figure out what's happening. And all the books in terms of a full-length spin-off, I'm not sure. Joey wants one. She keeps harping that she should be Orphan X and take over for Evan since he's old and washed up. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, don't tell Evan that. Right. So we'll see. So, okay, so this is Sarah Scott. Where's my other Sarah? There's two Sarah. There, okay, I can't see her. She's with all the kids running around. Okay, that's Sarah. How much of
that's me.
was influenced by your own work? I love the quirks he has that make him not fit in normal society. I can relate to him. I look, I feel it's so funny. There's way more of Evan in me than I was even aware of till I was like 3 or 4 books in. And all of a sudden I had this experience where I realized that everything he's dealing with in very concrete ways are a projection of a lot of things I'm working through, of course, in different ways in my own personal life. But a lot of his quirks are my quirks. You know, I prefer bourbon to vodka, though I like vodka, but you know, his engagement with, he likes alcohol. He likes just the right amount. You know, and I think one of the things that happens a lot is I think people who are consumed by books and fiction, all of us, whether we're readers, you know, acting talent like Scott or writers, I think we feel a little bit like we're outside of, we don't fit perfectly into society. It's kind of like why we like stories a lot. They take us in a different direction, in a different way. And so there's an observational component to it. I think when you like story, I always feel like I'm a little bit on the outside looking in and observing and enjoying. It's not like it's a terrible, lonely perspective, but I like watching. I like listening to dialects. Scott, I'm sure you do that all the time when you're sitting on the subway or a bus,
Sure.
and you listen to people and
Yes.
picking up quirks. And so a little bit of Evan's outsideness is that. And I think the things that he's striving, the way he's striving for integration is something also that's a big part of me. You know, and there's a lot more specific traits that I don't want to get into unless I'm in a therapy session. So just back off, Sarah, Scott.
So one thing that,
Will we
sorry,
ever see-
if I could just make one comment is, so like you have when Peter's arm comes out of the socket and they're sitting there and he's talking about, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever your pain. And he makes the comment about your face getting burnt off. And I love how in the middle of the child's in horrible pain, they have a discussion about, well, is your face getting burnt off before or after it's set on fire? Or before or after they tear it off? Is it set on fire before or after? And I'm just like, that is so me. I'm going to take that little detail and in the middle of a big dramatic scenario, my mind is going to go to something so irrelevant. And it's just those little things like that where it's like, this is beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's the distraction technique when you're dealing with kids. And I love kids. You know, my mom, when I was growing up, well, she still does. My mom works in international adoptions. And she's placed about 3,000 kids with families, mostly from overseas. And so my house was just teeming with children all the time from Russia and Guatemala and China and Vietnam and, you know, just from all around the world, Russia. And you know, so I grew up just with a real fondness for kids, and they were just all over the place. And I love I love the smart assness. I love their close affiliation with truthfulness. You know, how they'll just say stuff they're just so much more open. And so it's so much fun for me with Peter because Peter has this sort of relentless truthfulness. Kids are so pure. He just says what he thinks all the time. It's one of the things that really goes through with Evan, because what he doesn't understand is all the layered bullshit in our social interactions, right? And he struggles with, you know, what I call the strange language of intimacy also. But a lot of it for him is small talk he doesn't understand. It's like, why the fuck would you do that? That's a total waste of time. Like it's not mission appropriate, you know? And so he really has a lot of fun with Peter. And so he can, you know, he'll distract him. And oh, wow. Sam Elliott is Tommy Stojak. That's a great idea, John Kirk.
I saw that, yeah.
Oh, I'm loving that. I'm putting that in my back pocket.
I have to say, if I can just break in here, as we're talking about Peter, there was a moment in this book with Peter, 2 moments. The first one made me howl with laughter. I think they're watching a movie and he's told to go to bed. And then later there's a moment that he shares with Evan. And then I go from howling with laughter to just sobbing. I mean, Peter's really a wonderful canvas that you get to paint on. And Evan sees so much emotion in him that, as you're saying, you know, he's not prepared for. It's just a wonderful, you know, usually it's the adult teaching the child. It's so wonderful to see a child teaching Evan the way.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott. That's very kind. It's funny. It's like if you listen to almost anyone, they can teach you. You know, it's like it's that Zen principle. There's a lot of Zen that underlies Evan. It's like the samurai ethic, right, of fighting. You know, it's all the same, right? The assume nothing means that part of the practice of either fighting or, like the mixed martial arts fighting or meditation or social interaction or emotional interaction is to see everything as if for the first time, right? That's something that cops are taught all the time, right? Or soldiers. It's like, you don't get into a rut that you think you know the room, right? Or you know the path. Look all the time, be alert. And so that's one of the things that's in Evan's training. And so he is trained to pay attention to everything as if it's the first time. It's very useful too in, interpersonal stuff, right? You get in a discussion with a friend or a spouse or a girlfriend or a kid or your parents, right? And we're used to falling into like, oh, I know this conversation, right? I know the edges and contours of this battle that will now be conducted in a certain way. If you go into everything fresh and you try and see everything as if for the first time, you can learn from anybody. I think that's because Evan's trained that way. He can kind of zero in, and Peter sometimes will be saying the most truthful thing in the room, right? Because he's a kid. If you're willing to pay attention, if you're willing to not slot it into having the answers. So, all right, Sarah Scott's back again with her 50 children. Let's see what she says. Oh, Rob was asking if I'll be answering the questions submitted through the Google Doc. Is Haley on the call? Where's Haley?
Well, I can do the questions for the Google Doc.
Oh, Colin, you have access. Will you just pop those into the chat?
Yeah,
or
okay.
cut and paste them in, and then we'll kind of keep rolling.
Okay.
Will we ever see Naomi Templeton again? You asked Twitter the Candy versus Mia question. My vote is Naomi. I love Naomi Templeton. She might be back. I'm very fond of her. I shot a movie some years ago, and the star was Naomi Watts. I wrote a movie called The Book of Henry. And when I was writing that book, when I went to go to do Out of the Dark, that was Naomi Templeton's first appearance, I had Naomi Watts a bit in mind, and I was thinking like just a tougher, rough and tumble version of Naomi Watts. That's why I stole her first name. It's because I was working with her on the film, and she was spectacular. She was top choice for the movie, and she did an extraordinary job. And so that's kind of where I pulled her from. Scott, what do you like in terms of voicing Naomi versus Candy versus Mia? Is it hard for you to find the modulation with all these different feminine voices?
Well, thankfully, they're not in the same scene at the same time. That's always hardest for any narrator, for a man doing a scene with two women in it, how to make them sound distinct from one another, or for a woman playing two men in a scene. Fortunately, each one of them, in those cases, I'm not doing a whole lot when I'm playing any of those roles. What I'm focused on in order to make them sound different from any other character is whatever them, it's a cliche for an actor. What's the motivation? But with Candy, it's very clear, we know how she was motivated at the beginning. It was rage. Then it was vengeance or seduction, whatever it was. Those things sound very different from one another. Mia, she's always just a treat, just because I love every single scene. There's a marvelous scene in this book coming up. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's happens right before Christmas, and Peter asks if he could before he goes to bed, if he could have eggnog, and she says, no, it's too sweet and it's expired. And Peter says, like my dreams. And just the eye roll that Mia has afterwards. It's just so much fun to get to play stuff like that. But to get back to the question, yeah, I don't really have a favorite of any of those characters. Probably Mia, just because, like everybody else, I want them to get together.
Yeah,
you're such a marvelous partner, Scott.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's Gregg will tell you. I mean, I'm emailing him several times throughout the production, sometimes to ask a question. We had something came up at the very end. I sent my script off to be researched by a professional, so he's looking up all of the names of these obscure vodkas, right? This weaponry that is it Kalashnikov, is it Kalishnikov, stuff like that. And there's a character in there whose last name is Gentner, and he found online that it was Gentner. So I'm doing it. And then suddenly later in the book, I see the word gentleman, like gent, next to Gentner. Man, I sent out a missive right away to Gregg saying, is he supposed to be Gentner? He's like, yeah, that's what I had in mind. So we redid all of them. There was like 40 or 50 of them. But it needs to be right.
And after that, I called Scott up. I was like, nah, I'm just fucking with you.
Oh, you dog.
I'd be used to that by now.
Because his nickname's the Gentleman. So it was one of those. Normally I'm like, hey, dealer's choice if it's close. But he's
Sure. But the thing was, I had never seen it. Maybe it was the case early on. He had never been called, Declan, the Gentleman, Gentner. I'd never seen those two words, gentleman, next to Gentner before. And I suddenly went, oh God, of course. It was his visual cue. And thank God Gregg makes himself as available as he does.
So let's see. How far ahead do I have the storyline planned for Evan? So after Prodigal Son, I know the next 1, 2, 3 books. The rough shape of them. Let's see. Elaine says, do not get rid of Evan. Start another series with Joey. Okay, I'm going to go do that right now. I'll see you guys.
Sit down.
Okay, just kidding. Okay, Mike says, I'm married while being a father of a 2-year-old. Oh my goodness. A very busy career, aspiring to be a writer, currently in 3-month writer's block. How do you power through those while maintaining your flow of the book and staying organized to see it to completion? Mike, what's your job? What's your day, the job that you're working in now?
I'm in medical sales, so I'm in the operating room every day. So I'm really busy moving around, just going 100 miles an hour all day long. So trying to carve out time to write is my biggest challenge. But
what's your work schedule like?
Up early and done kind of early. So I'm usually in the operating room by 7 a.m. and I'm up by 4:30, get a workout in, and then I go there, usually home by 3. So
the thing I found, look, everyone's going to tell you that it's all about ass and chair time. You just got to get the time in, right? And so that becomes habit. It's just like for a workout, right? When you're not working out, the trope, when you've like gone on vacation and you come back and you're like, shit, I got to get like, I got to get the water bottle. Like you prime yourself for it. And before you go into writing, it's a similar thing. Like you got to have a process that you clear your head. I find that like a 2-hour chunk, if you want to be a novelist, 2 hours is sort of like the minimal rough draft headway window. And I wouldn't schedule too much, because if you schedule too much, you're not going to do it. And then you're going to fail, and then you're going to lose trust in yourself. But I would figure out every weekend, no matter what, like say Sunday from X amount of time, your wife's going to take the 2-year-old, you're going to have a 2-hour chunk. And maybe during the week you find, an hour twice or something, right? But I would set some kind of schedule. And then what's going to happen is your brain and your body are going to get used to it. It doesn't matter what you do. You can reread, you can shove words around on the page. But initially it's going to be about going somewhere. So you think about it with a workout template. When you first go, if you've been off, you look like you're always in shape, but you've probably had we've all had those times you come back from vacation or something and you have to get back into it. Set low marks and hit them. And then once you've hit them for a month straight, then start to expand them. And if you're writing and it's going well, you can go a little bit over, but don't go too much over, because you don't want to tell your wife you're doing 2 hours and then you do 4 and then she's like aggravated, right? So you got to trust yourself to do it right, especially when you have other demands, and you have to trust yourself that you're going to stop too, if that makes sense initially.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's right. It's the pandemic helped me have all that time that I didn't normally have. So I started it, and now that I got back in schedule, it threw me off. So you're right. I think having that routine is what I got established. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay. So there's a question from Katina. Am I pronouncing that right? Good. Okay. Using time between releases to catch up on your other books. What are the must reads? Okay. Have you read all the short stories, the Orphan X short stories? There's Buy a Bullet. Okay, so that's all. I would say you could read The Survivor. I recommend You're Next. They're Watching.
Oh yeah.
The Crime Writer is a favorite of mine. It's a little bit more mystery, modern noir-ish. And then there's also one called Don't Look Back. That's like my badass female lead, like woman in the jungle squaring off against a very bad man. So I'd say that should give you some reading to do. Okay.
You're next still freaks me out when I think about that. I remember working on that and thinking, I don't see anywhere. I mean, part the pleasure of the job is trying to guess what happens next. And whenever I can, I'm like, yay, good for me. I saw that one coming, and yet Gregg's work always surprises me. And it was on like every single page in Your Next. When the title was explained, I mean, when that phrase is actually used, I went, holy shit. And it's the coolest part of my job is the surprise, even though I know it's coming.
Scott, you do a first read all the way through, right? And then you go back and start to record, but you do one, and do you mark it all up? And
different narrators work differently. Some narrators will highlight their PDFs and they'll color code the dialogue so they can tell just at a visual cue in the peripheral vision. Okay, well, this is yellow and blue. Okay, great, that's Evan and Mia. This is yellow and green. Okay, that's Evan and Joey, whatever it is. Just to remind you what's coming. I've never really done that. I don't, I have a pronunciation spreadsheet about, for the average Orphan X book, they're about 10 pages long. And those are all the words, arranged alphabetically so that I can go find out, okay, what's that vodka again? What's that country? And, that little town in Laos, wherever. I have that in front of me. So rather than mark up the manuscript, that's what I keep on an open screen on my computer so that I can see it at a.
See, I don't have to pronounce it. I can just look that shit up and put it in.
Yeah, I know.
Like, what's some exotic city from Evan? And everyone's going to think I'm like, Ian.
Yeah. And that freedom you feel to throw that shit in there. Yeah.
And then
I just love that.
If anyone asks me, I'm like, I don't ask Scott. He had to actually pronounce it. I'm just here trying to look impressive. Okay, so I'm going to move into kind of speed round. Let's see. Louise said, you don't fall into any disability tropes, and Trayvon is portrayed with dignity and respect. That seems like a common theme with characters. Evan helps. Can you please talk about your creation and what social responsibilities you hold as a writer? Well, thank you. That's a very kind note. Again, with Trayvon, I didn't even realize this till I was asked when the book came out. Because somebody said, what was your inspiration for him? And I have an uncle who's now passed away who is mentally retarded. And my interactions with him, I mean, anytime that you're writing, like I don't write black characters, I write a black character, right? I write a special needs character. I write a woman. I'm not writing women characters in general because, it's you always want the specific. And so one of the things I try and do is I just try and get into that, when you're writing a character, what you want to do is you want to pull on the face mask and see the world through their eye holes, of really like, what are the things they're thinking? I try and not make anybody a saint because they're, people, I hated that trope. I put a lot of gay characters in my earlier books, not a lot, but I had a few or one or two in each book. And I realized that when straight writers write gay characters, a lot of times they're either like very swishy in a way that was offensive or stupid or reductive, or they'd make them like saints, right? Because they had to be like wonderful. So they were all like starting orphanages and like sources of great wisdom. And so it's one of the things that I really try and avoid if I'm writing other characters, like, with Joey, who's a Hispanic 16-year-old hacker. She's got all sorts of flaws and texture and grit and all sorts of things. And I'm not trying to write her as an Hispanic character, right? With all this sensitivity surrounding it. I'm trying to write a girl who I know and I think about in my head. And that means she comes with all sorts of texture that makes it harder for her to feel reductive, I hope. So I'm glad you think that that's something I'm successful with.
Do you mind if I jump in on that?
Please,
I know
Scott.
you're trying to kind of speed through, but from the voiceover side, it's become, especially in the last 6 months, we've become a lot more sensitive to that. There was actually some discussion about whether I would be the right person to narrate the most recent short story because it's from Joey's point of view, and I did it because obviously I've done everything else in the series. But the publisher and we spoke on the phone one day, and he goes, I'm just wondering, I mean, ultimately, yes, Orphan X is in it, Evan is in it, but it's from the perspective of a young brown girl. You are none of those things. And I said, I get it, you know? And I said, if you need to get somebody else, I totally understand. But I think what sold them on the idea of just leaving it alone was the fact that Gregg doesn't write. There's nothing about Joey, even though she is, you know, established as being Latina, never described an accent, never described anything, and certainly, you know, her cadence, right, in the dialogue, none of that says, you know, that she is anything other than a girl in need. And that's always been the same way that, you know, myself and my colleagues, that we approach it. It's like, you know, okay, yes, here's a gay character. I'm not going to play a gay character. He might be a very fussy man, right? It's like, he's meticulous. Okay, I'm going to focus on that because that's respectful. I really believe that advice that authors give other authors to be better writers really reflects towards what I do too. And the same thing, you know, if you want to be a better writer, read voraciously. If you want to be a better narrator, read voraciously. Well, my favorite advice about writing came from Richard Matheson. He had 5 rules for being a good writer. Rule number 1 was don't be an asshole. And rules 2 through 5 were don't be an asshole.
Yeah, excellent.
And I think about that when portraying characters like that.
But unfortunately, his rule number 6 was ignore rules 1 through 5. So he was a total asshole, that guy. He was No, he was a pretty lovely guy, huh, Scott?
Yeah, he really was. Yeah, I get to meet him a handful of times. Lovely man.
Yeah, I mean, and look, and Scott, you know, a lot of times with Joey, you know, or characters from different backgrounds, there is a tone that we want to be disrespectful. We don't want to write saints, right? We want to take it in hard. So, how am I dealing with Peter as he ages to find the sullen preteen personality? I don't know yet. I have him frozen for now. I'm not going to deal with him I got my hands full with Joey. All right. So just, that's enough. All right. How much of Evan's past you have built out? Sarah Scott, you're going to see a lot of his past in Prodigal Son. Prodigal Son is really going to open up the kimono a lot more than I have before in terms of showing where he's from. Colin Rutherford, when you dreamed of being an author, is this what you expected? What is different? And then there's a question for Scott. You know, it's funny. Usually when you reach a goal, I'm sure you all have this in your life, you know, we're goal setting creatures in a way. And so I don't think I ever have gotten to a place where I attain a goal and then I'm content with it, right? Because the mechanism of moving towards a goal is what fuels you, right? And so whenever I reach a certain stage, I want to write something trickier. I start every book scared. I always like biting off more than I can chew and then figuring out how to chew it. And so it's not frozen, but now and then I'll stop and slow down. I had a moment this week when, you know, my publisher sends me these tip-in pages to have the signed books, and I'll get 1,000. I've got as many as 3,000 before, where I have to sign all these pages. And it was so funny because I was sitting there signing them, and look, it's I don't know, my 6th round of signing 1,000 to 3,000 pages, and it's a lot of work, and it quickly becomes tedious. And I was sitting there like, I don't want to sign all these. And then I thought, you know what, if you ever told me in high school or college that this is what I'd be doing, is sitting in my house and signing 1,000 tip-in pages for readers in the UK, right? And I had the audacity to complain about that or act like that was a chore, like I would have told myself to fuck off right fast, you know? So part of it is to back up and reset that thing and make sure that I'm doing all this stuff with gratitude and with perspective, because sometimes it gets into a slog of like, I'm booking the next book tour. And it's like, you know what? That's a delight. Like talking to readers is a delight. Signing 1,000 pages so that because people want to have a signature because the books and stories mean something to him. So I think it's a process of keeping the drive forward, you know, and wanting to keep stretching and wanting to not feel like I'm good enough, because everything can always be better. That's one of the fun things when you choose a career in art or entertainment. You know, everything can be better, always. Somebody said being a writer is like having homework for the rest of your life. You know, but also starting to make sure that you keep hold of gratitude for where you are, for where you've been, so that you don't get kind of insulated from the wonder and the joy of being able to just sit down and think and type shit for a living, right? And have people like you show up on a Sunday. I mean, it's such a privilege for me. And that's a genuine thing. So it's kind of a balance of those two, to be like, you want to stay not content, but you also want to hold a lot of gratitude for where I am, I guess. And then Scott, there's a question for you in here that said, with all the great books, how do you decide which ones you narrate?
Great question. To be honest, I will, I think books land in our lap when we need to read them. When I've read, I remember I dealt with a health crisis about 20, 30 years ago, and a book about that subject literally landed right in front of me at a time when I really needed to read it. And I think that the same thing happens professionally. And books that I never would have picked up, and then on the face of it, I wouldn't be even interested in reading, they've been some of the best work experiences of my life. I mean, I get to do What Makes Sammy Run by Bud Schulberg. I'd never even thought about that book. It was barely on my radar.
That's a great
yeah, it's not available anymore. There's a newer version. The contract expired. But yeah, it's a marvelous book. It's the great American novel. And whether it's fiction or nonfiction, look, I'd never been interested in Alexander Hamilton. I obviously knew who he was, but the Ron Chernow biography came along, and
that was amazing.
Long before it became the basis for the musical. But I have never learned more from a book in my life, and so I say yes to as many things as I can, just because I feel like maybe that providentially, maybe I need to learn this right now.
Have you ever had, I mean, I remember you described doing an audiobook that you don't like digging a hole with your face. Have you ever had one that you just feel like you're going to die, and you don't need to name names, but where you just get into it and it's like dragging your ass into that booth?
Oh, go on, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, I can't do it. But there are, look, there's a lot of crap out there, and thankfully I don't do too much of it. But there was a book that by an author. I've done a lot of his other work, and yes, that's all I kept thinking about. It is like digging a hole with your face, because you can't imagine how I'm going to get this done. And there are days I go into the booth and I get about 5 pages in and I realize, yeah, my job today is face digging. That it's just, I'll get it done.
Better than ditch digging though, man.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
That's why you grew that beard. It's for face digging protection. It's like you got your backhoe attachment on that thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so Patricia had a personal question for Scott that says, without getting too personal, what about your life beyond books? Do you have a spouse and or kids? What is important to you other than the job?
Oh, wonderful question.
It's all books.
Never got married, don't have kids. My girlfriend, Suzanne Freeman, she's a narrator as well. We've been kind of sheltering in place. Look, since the first week of March, we came back. We had an event in New York, which was the hot spot of the world. And we arrived, we must have missed it by days. So we've been sitting here just trying to make the most out of our lives. And I've asked myself that question a lot. When quarantine started, I saw somebody on ESPN was giving advice to college athletes. He said, come out of this better than you went into it. Learn something that isn't sports. Learn something that isn't in your field. So I thought that's wonderful advice. So frankly, I turned my bookshelves. This is what's important to me: silent movies and comic book history and William Shatner autograph, Star Trek. I'm a massive Trekkie. I just sat down and I started pulling these Buster Keaton biographies off the shelf, and Douglas Fairbanks. I'd never read a biography of him before. And
so what do you think of Star Trek Discovery?
To be honest, we've been saving it. We have not started it yet. And I know that sounds like heresy, but I didn't have all access until just recently.
Skip series 1. That's all I can say.
The what?
Skip series 1.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. We have a couple more and then we'll close it up. I seem to have a close relationship with Joey and Evan. When did you know they were ready to be released onto the world? That's from Sarah Ann. You know, it's funny with Joey. Robert Crace tells a story. Are any of you Robert Crace fans? Okay. So it's really inane for me to ask questions on Zoom because there's no good response, but I'll assume some of you are. In The Monkey's Raincoat, his first Elvis Cole book, he killed Joe Pike at the end. And then when he rewrote, he kept Joe Pike. And he calls it like the best, he jokingly will say, it's the best financial decision I made in my life. Joey was supposed to, has everyone read Hellbent, I assume? Spoiler alert, so just mute me if you haven't. But Joey was supposed to die at the end of Hellbent. That was the outline. That was where everything was headed. And I got to the end and I enjoyed writing her so much, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And what I liked the most, and it's taken me a while to realize I was doing this, all of the supporting characters are better than Evan at the one thing they do in their lane. There's a line that Jack tells Evan early on where he says, your job is to learn a little bit about everything from people who know everything about one thing. Yeah. So Joey's a better hacker. Tommy's a better sniper. And what's really fun for me is it means that everyone can make fun of Evan or everyone can kind of denigrate him. So I didn't want one of these loving relationships like, which is a dynamic that I love. So I'm not criticizing the dynamic, but sort of like Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible, where everyone kind of admires him and he's the kind of bright-eyed boy. I wanted Evan to have all these relationships where people are hitting his vulnerabilities and blind spots from a bunch of angles. And like Joey can get under his skin and denigrate him and make fun of him in certain ways that's completely different than how Tommy will, or Melinda will, right? Or Mia or Peter. And so I wanted the way that she sort of takes him to task was so enjoyable for me for some reason. And it let me kind of play with such nuance with the characters that I got to the end and I couldn't let her go. So that's really that. And let me see here. Okay, after writing Out of the Dark, did you get a visit from the Secret Service saying you can't write or it's too close to their actual procedures? So Out of the Dark was sort of it's my homage to Day of the Jackal. And the challenge, I knew that book was coming, you know, probably when I started The Nowhere Man, the second book. I knew that the big bad, once we dug into everything, would be the President of the United States. And I always wanted to do an homage to The Day of the Jackal. That's one of my favorite thrillers. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool? It'll probably take me about 4 books to get there. If I can make the President of the United States, I can have us rooting for the Jackal to kill the President of the United States. And so, yes, my Google searches were very tricky, you know, like hotel with best balcony view of the White House, right? So I was doing a lot of things that I thought I'd be getting a knock on the door. But I wound up not having that happen. But yeah, I think I have pretty good relationships. I have a good Rolodex with SEALs and Secret Service. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's in public domain.
Look behind you.
Sorry?
Look behind you.
Yeah, right. I had a lot of, you know, I got diagrams of the presidential limo. I mean, I just really wanted to get into it. And that's an example of a book that I just, you know, I want to say it was one of the big producers said, write yourself into a corner and then figure out how to write your way out. And Out of the Dark was that. I just had no idea how I figured out all of the research. I had that all in place. And then I thought, how the hell am I going to do this? How's this going to come to an end? And a lot of times if I go in with that kind of fear or just, you know, editorial anxiety is maybe a better word for it, the answers will give themselves to me. And it was funny because I kept looking at all this, everything from the dry cleaning to the window panes, to the sensors, to the electronic noses in the White House. And I kept thinking, how am I going to make a way in that really lives up to being something that's worthy of a high concept that's that big, of an assassin getting the President of the United States. And so it took me about halfway into the book before I started to get an idea, and then took a while to flesh it out, but it was a lot of fun. So I'd like to close with one more question to Scott, which is, what is your favorite thing or moment that you, like in the process of recording an audiobook, what's that thing that you feel like you're totally in the zone, that you lose track of time, right? That you're doing the thing that you're meant to do? Do you know what I mean? Like when you're working and all of a sudden you think it's been an hour, but it's been 3 hours. What's the thing that happens happens? Do you feel, Michael Conley describes it sometimes when he's in the zone as being like in the tube when you're surfing, that the story's all around you and it's all you can see and it's surrounding you. What's the thing that feels like you can get lost in as an audiobook?
Well, I mean, there's certain accents that are just right in my wheelhouse, and I could do an hour-long scene and think it took 15 minutes, certainly. But to be honest, look, I'm not here to blow smoke up your ass, but I would say this whether you were here or not. The fact of the matter is, as I'm working on this series, I feel like I'm in the zone because my friend Pat, the voiceover guy I was telling you about, Pat Fraley, taught me that all human interaction, all communication, written or verbal, comes down to three things. We communicate with one another to touch, to teach, or to amuse. And people are more often than not doing more than one at a time. A nonfiction book will be amusing, but it will also be teaching you at the same time. In Orphan X, it's like all three of them. There's just this synergistic feel. And there's a scene at the end of the previous book, a scene between, I don't want to go into it too much, but between Evan and Mia, where it's like she first recognizes who he is. And it's just, there's that moment where, you know, it's like, if they only knew me, they would feel different. It's like they finally get to actually see one another. And I finished that, and I just remember, I was sobbing. And it was a great kick-ass scene too. And then that emotional beat happened at the same time. And I remember thinking, this is where I'm supposed to be. You know, my life, my career led me here. And yeah, it feels like that all the time when I'm working on this series.
Well, thank you, Scott. I want you all to know that we rehearsed that answer for like yesterday at great length. So. And
I gave him my PayPal address.
That's right. That's right. Well, he's going to do his next audiobook thing. He's going to have the same fucking answer next week. So don't be too impressed. Well, look, Scott, I so appreciate working with you. Like I said, you were my collaborator on the series. First man in, before I had an editor, before I had a publisher. So you've been there from ground zero. It's always fun to talk to you. I hope the pandemic ends soon, so we'll have a chance to get to drink in person again.
That'd be great. I mean, everybody else, we live like 5 miles from one another. You know, it's heartbreaking not to get to see the people that we, you know, love more often.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
it's wonderful working with you as well.
And Colin, thank you so much for arranging this and the whole, you know, all the stuff.
Everybody.
It has been amazing, and it's been cool. You guys are amazing. You've got such a bromance.
The bromance is strong with these two. Yes.
Any upcoming virtual events you guys want to plug?
Virtual events?
Anything coming up? Because I know Scott has a PBS documentary, right, Scott, that just came out?
Oh, bless you. Yes, it's airing this week. So? It's on, you can find it on demand. It's an episode of Nature called Santa's Wild Home.
Excellent.
So so anything you guys want to plug on any of that end, I'm sure everybody would love to hear it.
Okay, well,
thank you for asking.
Can I plug our website, the orphanxfanclub.com? And
we have a website. I forgot.
What we've got is we've got a blog on there where each of our moderators takes one of your characters and actually writes as you. So Greg, I write as you. There's Tommy Stojak on there. There's Joey's writes her own blog, and it's all sort of COVID related as well. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
It really is a labor of love, that website. I have to commend you all. Everybody has contributed to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, dip in and I've read some of the fan fiction, which I quite a bit. I might just steal a bunch of it and just cut it end to end and just turn that in for my next book, because it might be done. So it might come down to you guys moving forward, because I don't know. I got some good new vodkas and I'm thinking about just taking a step back.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to put a few Easter eggs in there myself.
Well, listen, I appreciate all of you coming out on a Sunday. It's good to see all your faces or icons. And that's it. So I appreciate it. It's great to have fans who are that kind of devoted. And onward and upward. Colin, thank you for all the stuff you do. Scotty and I'll talk shortly.
Sounds
And
great.
the rest of you, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Appreciate
Stay
it.
safe, everybody,
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
and happy holidays.
You too.
You too.